event, the founding of the Thursday Club, an event that perhaps wasn't as world-changing as that first flight at Kitty Hawk, but one that, nonetheless, has had a lasting impact on this community since the day it first got off the ground on November 12, 1903. Tonight, we celebrate the centennial of the New Wilmington Thursday Club, commemorating 100 years of women getting together to learn, to grow, to socialize, and to help others. Tonight, you've already heard the story about the very beginning of the Thursday Club and what those first meetings were like. But for the next few minutes, let's take a deeper look into what everyday life was like for those original club pioneers. Women such as Miss Grace Atchison, Miss Sarah Foster Brownlee, Miss Linnie Hodgins, Mrs. Margaret Erla Mitchell, and Mrs. Louise Barr Robertson, 5 of the 24 charter members. It was Mrs. Robertson who wrote, "We hope Thursday Club will have many more years of enjoyment and success." Well, the years have been good to the Thursday Club, so let's also find out what sort of enjoyment, success, activities, projects, and celebrations these ladies, and those over the years who have followed in their footsteps, have been involved in during this century of change. So what was life like in New Wilmington at the turn of the century for those original Thursday Club women? Well, it was probably like life in most of America. To quote Peter Jennings and Todd Brewster in their book The Century, America in 1900 was a provincial society of just 76 million people, a place of such innocence that it is hard for people at the edge of the 20th century to contemplate its quiet life. A nation of dirt roads, horse-drawn carriages, tight corsets, and Victorian pretensions, outhouses, top hats and bowlers, McGuffey readers, and the Ladies' Home Journal. To help us get a good snapshot of what life was like in 1903, let's grab our Brownie camera and take a walk downtown to do a little shopping in New Wilmington. First, we head down Market Street, walk past Wright Block, to Kelly Varsity Club, past Campbell Company, and, of course, the bakery, where they're always selling something with plenty of lard in it. Sadly, some things don't change. We stop at the cash grocery store of J.H. Thompson, where we can buy 20 pounds of sugar for $1. At J.F. Williams' store, we can purchase the most stylish corset made to fit everybody. Right. C.C. Jackstimer is the place to buy jewelry such as collar buttons and neck chains. And if you need your eyes checked, this is the place for you. In the middle of remodeling your house? Well, at J.F. Williams, you can purchase ruffled curtains for 50 cents to $1 a pair. If you need wallpaper, be sure to stop at McDowell's store, where a double roll costs as much as a whopping 28 cents. This solid oak frame red corduroy couch is a steal for $14 at the W.R. Campbell store. The business of McCreary and Ramsey, located behind McCreary Hotel, offers several services, including furniture repair and upholstery, a livery, and, would you believe, an undertaking business with a recently added funeral car. How thoughtful. Now, if what you're looking for can't be found in New Wilmington, simply get in your carriage, take the Sharpsville train, or ride the first bus to Newcastle. And if you still can't find that dress you've always wanted, you can always order one, not online perhaps, but from a catalog, if you have a slim figure. Just how did our Thursday Club friends travel in the early 1900s? Well, bicycles had been around for quite some time, so that was always a good option. But for the less athletic, horses and carriages were the main means of travel. Train service was available on the Sharpsville Railroad, with a station on East Neshannock, where the Amish Peddler now stands, and at the Wilmington Junction, located south of town near Elders Corners. Old Sharpie, as it was often called, was part of the Pennsylvania Railroad system, so nationwide train service was available. Then along came cars, which eventually closed the Sharpie train service, which ran from 1881 to 1931. In 1903, jeweler and optician C.C. Jackstimer purchased the first car in New Wilmington, a Pierce Arrow. Mr. and Mrs. Walter Sewell owned a 1907 Ford, and this 1916 electric car was owned by Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Elliott. The faster the car coasted downhill to recharge the batteries, the further it could go from its home base. The ladies of Thursday Club undoubtedly all had cars by 1920. Wonder if there were any traffic jams in New Wilmington like this one in St. Louis in 1920. What kinds of roads were available for Mr. Jacksteimer's Pierce Arrow? He drove on dirt roads, of course, even downtown, since there were no paved streets in New Wilmington until 1916. Neshannock Avenue, from the railroad station on the east to the Borough line on the west, and all of Market Street were the first paved streets, a total distance of less than 2 miles. The roads, of course, weren't paved with asphalt, but with bricks, and came complete with real stone curbs and flagstone sidewalks. Vine Street is the only one left today with the original red bricks. Now at this point, you may be asking, what did the early Thursday Club ladies do about electricity to run their blow dryers, curling irons, and microwaves? Well, obviously, these electric conveniences either weren't invented yet or were still in development. But the Thursday Club pioneers did have some electricity, since it had been introduced to the New Wilmington residents back in 1892. Those first electric lights were run by a gasoline generator. But evidently by 1903, the gasoline engine had been replaced with a boiler system fueled by coal. Several times in 1903 and 1904, the Globe printed short, intriguing announcements stating things like, "The electric lights will not be turned on next Monday morning owing to some repairs that must be made on the boiler. Those interested can govern themselves accordingly." As electricity spread into more and more homes, residents were charged not by how much electricity they used, but by how many light bulbs they owned. Yet at best, electricity was an on-again, off-again convenience that, if they had had them, would have really wreaked havoc with their microwaves and VCRs, causing them to constantly blink 12 o'clock. Maybe some things will always be the same. Did our Thursday Club families have running water? Sure, since water was first turned on in March 1893. But did every home have water? No, but the borough was working hard to get it into all homes. The August 18, 1904 edition of the Globe states, "The Waterworks Company has extended its mains on Front Street and on Water Street, altogether about 1/4 of a mile. There are upwards of 3 miles to supply the town." By the fall of 1915, the water company proposed to supply water by meter at the rate of 50 cents per 1,000 gallons with a minimum of 75 cents a month. In 1955, the borough bought the system. So running water was becoming more generally available by 1903. But what about a sewer system? There was great concern in New Wilmington and fear of diseases, especially typhoid fever. Though health was the main issue, let's face it, folks wanted modern bathrooms. They were tired of taking their weekly baths in a tub in the kitchen. In fact, in 1908, one of the Thursday Club's programs was a debate on the sewerage. A committee was elected to cooperate with the school children and teachers for village improvement. They took their concerns to the school board in the spring. However, it wasn't until 1910 that the sewage system was finally installed. What about phones? Well, the first telephone was installed in 1896. But did everyone in Thursday Club have a phone? Of course not. There was a pay station where people could make toll calls within the county. In an article in the Globe dated July 21, 1904, a survey was conducted to see if there was enough interest in establishing a local exchange in New Wilmington. But since all calls outside the borough would require paying a toll, the idea did not sit well. In fact, the article ended by saying, "So far as a local exchange is concerned, we can procure one at half the price asked by the Bell Company, or we can gather on the Diamond and have our chat with one another as free as air." Change and phones, however, were inevitable, and the first ordinance for a telephone system was passed in 1905. By 1918, New Wilmington had its own telephone company owned by Mr. Totten. Even as recently as 1956, Mr. Totten's wife was in charge of the system. She climbed the poles herself to connect the wires and insisted on installing the phones in the room closest to the pole, even if that meant putting it in the bathroom. Those first telephones were party lines, and to top it off, there was a 2.5-minute limit on the amount of time you could talk before you'd be cut off. Sure glad some things have changed, huh? As you can see, the early members of the Thursday Club lived in a time of great technological change. Yet, since they didn't have radios until the 20s when KDKA became the first radio station in the country, Thursday Club members spent a lot of time reading and getting involved in the contemporary issues of the community and the country. For example, at the January meeting in 1904, the president, Mrs. Campbell, read an article from the North American Review entitled "Women's Assumption of Sex Superiority." The minutes say it best. An animated discussion followed. Some of the other topics of discussion those first years included the threatened war between Russia and Japan, Tammany and its influence on New York, and Panama and the New Canal Treaty. Women's suffrage was the hot subject in 1915, and one of the club's programs in 1937 was simply titled "Famous Mistresses of the White House." Some things haven't changed, have they? Earlier tonight, you saw how the early Thursday Club members ran the meetings. There was a roll call, with each member responding by sharing some fact about the current topic they were discussing. Regular attendance at Thursday Club meetings was a serious matter. In fact, roll call was taken at each meeting all the way up until around 1960, and attendance records were kept until 1972. These meticulous records were no doubt kept because in 1907, a bylaw was passed which stated, "Names will be dropped from the roll after inexcusable absence of more than 2 meetings." And get this, a fine of 5 cents shall be imposed for absences without a good excuse. Not sure what constituted a good excuse, but thankfully, this bylaw was omitted in the 1957-58 booklet. Of course, the first meetings were held in homes, with the Hotel McCreary playing host to some social evenings after it was opened in December 1904. The building housed a restaurant featuring excellent dining, and after Prohibition, a liquor-serving bar in the basement. Later, from 1938 and into the 50s, Westminster rented the building, renamed it College Hall, and used it to house students. The Thursday Club was the first women's club in New Wilmington. Wanting to stay in touch with larger interests and hoping that they would gain a broader vision and share mutual benefits, the Thursday Club joined the Lawrence County Federation of Women's Clubs in the fall of 1924 and continued the membership until sometime after April 1951. Over the years, Thursday Club members continued to be involved in current affairs and causes. During both World Wars, they worked for the Red Cross, knitted for the soldiers, and held a benefit concert. They knit wool afghans for the amputees in the Veterans Hospital. On the local level, the club helped with various projects, including the planting of trees from Newcastle to New Wilmington, in memory of our soldiers and noted individuals. In 1915, they sent a resolution to the Borough Council asking for 5 things: conservation of trees, that persons owning chickens be required to keep them on their own property, that a means be found to keep the dust down, that a speed limit be enforced in the borough, and that property owners keep down the weeds on the street in front of their properties. In 1922, Thursday Club members appointed a committee to confer with Fair Oaks Cemetery to help beautify the cemetery and the roads leading to it. They even got involved in a murder trial in 1930 by asking the Newcastle News to suppress publicity regarding the case. They also wrote an article for the Globe asking for fire protection in the form of a pumping engine and a fire warden. Partly because of their influence, Old Betsy was purchased in 1929. We're going to take a short break here, but when we return, we'll take a look at some very special Thursday Club meetings. Stay tuned.
And now it's time for Did You Know?
Hey, did you know in 1903 there were 266 acres of cleared land, 24 head of cattle, and 24 dogs in New Wilmington?
No, but I do know that someone with way too much time on his hands must have counted them.
And did you know the coal bill to run the electric plant in New Wilmington in August of 1904 was $92.48?
Shocking. But I did know that that same year, 1904, the ice cream cone, the hamburger, and iced tea were introduced at the St. Louis World's Fair.
Well, that's nice, but what does that have to do with New Wilmington?
Well, nothing really.
Did you know that in 1904 the New Wilmington Council established the price for day laborers at $1.50 a day?
Ooh.
And that Dr. H.E. Barr charged $10 to deliver a baby in 1904?
No, I did not know that. But you know, a mere 2 years later, in 1906, President Teddy Roosevelt was the first U.S. president to travel outside the country.
So?
Well, he visited Panama to inspect the construction of the Panama Canal, and he sat on top of one of the giant steam shovels.
What does that have to do with anything about New Wilmington? Hey, did you know that spitting on sidewalks in New Wilmington was prohibited in 1906, and that express wagons were forbidden on sidewalks in 1912?
Sure didn't, but did you know that brassieres were first manufactured in 1913 and zippers in 1914?
Right. Anyway, did you know that a New Wilmington police officer in 1916 made $3 a day? And that home mail delivery didn't begin until 1926.
Well, did you know that from 1920 to 1930, the first refrigerators, radios, and vacuum cleaners were produced, and that during that decade, the number of refrigerators went from less than 5,000 to almost 1 million, and the number of radios grew from 0 to 5 million?
No, I didn't know that. But did you know that in New Wilmington, Thompson's Pool Room and Bowling Alley opened in 1922, and that the New Wilmington Theater opened in 1941?
Yeah, and I bet movie tickets only cost 26 cents.
Well, actually they did.
Figures.
Now, what about the Thursday Club?
What about the Thursday Club?
Did you know that in 1907, someone in the Thursday Club actually had the audacity to make a motion to change meetings from once every 2 weeks to once a month?
Ooh.
The motion failed.
Actually, I did know that.
You did?
Yes. In fact, the Thursday Club is something I just happen to know a lot about.
Is that so?
For example, did you know that in November 1961, the Collect was sung to the tune of America the Beautiful, the theme for that year?
Really?
And that a new gavel, the one still being used today, was presented in the name of Mrs. Robert Galbraith Jr. in 1963.
Well, that's impressive. I heard they gave the old gavel to the Garden Club. Wonder what they did with it. Plant it?
Very fun.
Anyway, did you know the Book of Minutes from the fall of 1951 to the spring of 59 was reported missing in 1963?
Ooh.
It's still missing to this day.
A real mystery. But did you know that the Thursday Club used to meet on Tuesdays? Just kidding.
Did you know that Louise Galbraith was appointed the first historian of the Thursday Club in April 1970? She served until 2002.
A tenure of historical proportions, to be sure.
That's right.
But did you know that until 1980, all names in the attendance books were listed as Miss or Mrs. So-and-so and not by the members' first and last names?
A real identity crisis, to be sure. But did you know that Thursday Club dues increased to $2.50 on January 20th, 1972, and dues are still the same 31 years later?
I didn't know that.
Well, you know it now, and don't you forget it.
Okay, that was interesting. Did you know that we're back? Well, we are. Now back to our look at the Thursday Club. Over the years, there have been some truly special Thursday Club meetings. For many years, there was a unique social event every February, usually held someplace other than in a home. The club had several colonial dress parties. On February 22, 1904, the party was with the women at Ladies' Hall, now known as Hillside, for an evening of music and readings. At one of the colonial dress parties, they danced the minuet. At the rehearsal, one of the Methodist brethren expressed his opinion that they were on their way to a very warm place for their dancing. What he may not have realized was that the pastor's wife was the accompanist. In 1917, they had a Japanese tea. They dressed in kimonos and served refreshments Japanese style. In March 1982, the women held a special program at the tavern titled Fashioning Women's Thoughts. Outfits from 8 decades were modeled by members. Mary Read modeled styles from 1900. Joan Meadows flapper danced the Charleston. Mary Beth McLowry and Mary Collins showed styles from the 1920s. Betty Schaefer and Mary Quinby from the 1940s. Janice Farmery from the 1950s. Betty Hart, the 1960s. And Kathy Mansell showed how they dressed in the 1980s. May was the month for picnics and special programs. The first joint meeting with the Garden Club was held in Brown Hall in May of 1946, with 90 women present. It became an annual affair, even after the Tuesday afternoon Garden Club joined them in 1963. The three clubs were growing in number, finding it harder to plan and to find a place to meet. So in 1978, after 32 years, the clubs went their separate ways. Occasionally, the first meeting in the fall is still held in a member's home. The first meeting in 1981 was held at Mary Irene McCowan's house. Doris Pace poured punch. Later that same year, Libby Burnside presented a program at the Tavern displaying her antique collection of toys and dolls. Speaking of the Tavern, it has been home to most Thursday Club meetings since around 1960. The building was originally built in 1855 for Dr. Seth Popenoe. In 1933, Cora DeRast rented the building and moved her restaurant business there from Newcastle Street. She later bought the building in the mid-50s. The current owner, Sandy Aquero, purchased the building in 1997. The first Thursday Club meeting held at the Tavern goes all the way back to February 2nd, 1933, just after it opened at its current location. In April 1987, the club changed from 2 meetings a month to 1, a meeting which included lunch at the Tavern. In 1992, the price of lunch was $7 with a choice of hot or cold entree. In 1994, it was raised to $8 and then stayed at that price until this fall, 9 years. Anyway, you may not have known this, but the Thursday Club was also famous in the past for its out-of-town trips. Twice the club visited Shenango, China in Newcastle. In 1945, 16 members made a trip to Pittsburgh to visit the art galleries, conservatory, and the planetarium. A bus trip to Pittsburgh in 1977 let them tour the Carnegie Museum and the Cathedral of Learning. The last out-of-town trip came in May of 1981, when they traveled to have lunch and visit Caldwell Museum School on the Mercer-Greenville Road. Thursday Club has always been generous to organizations and to individuals. During the first 65 years, they not only donated money, but had the time to have bake sales and make things. One year, they had 2 bake sales and a program on birds, which netted over $370 for road improvement. They donated books to the county jail and to Westminster's main library, the children's library, as well as to the high school. They also took part in a fundraiser called Grease for Peace, collecting 5 gallons of grease to make soap for the children of Greece. Bulbs and flowers were donated to decorate the school grounds. In 1945, they asked that any spare money be given to entertain the Navy and Army men at Westminster. That same year, they donated 13 boxes of clothing and bedding to the United Service Center. They were in charge of the New Wilmington Cancer Drive. Joanne Lewis, with the help of Thursday Club, started the glass recycling program in New Wilmington. Since 1971, the Christmas season has seen the club donating money to various organizations such as the Women's Shelter, Hospice, Oxfam, Salvation Army, City Rescue Mission, and Children's Advocacy Center. And donations of up to $350 have been given to local families that need financial help. Anniversaries have always been cause for celebration for the Thursday Club. Over the years, special programs were held for all major anniversaries: the 10th, 25th, 50th, 75th, and even the 90th. The main theme for all these celebrations was always the history of the Thursday Club, looking back at the past, and then looking forward to the future. Teas and dinners were held, women honored, and toasts given. So tonight, as we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Thursday Club, we've also looked back at the past, and just like those before us, we look forward with anticipation to the future. As you can see, life has changed a lot over the past 100 years. Many things have come and gone. And yet some things have remained the same. The love of community and the desire to learn, to grow, to socialize, and to help others. What will life be like 100 years from today, when the Thursday Club members of 2103 celebrate their bicentennial? Will they still be meeting at the tavern? Will future technology bring about changes that are more profound than in the past? Only time will tell, and though we won't be here to enjoy the new discoveries, we can still say today, along with charter member Louise Barr Robertson, we hope Thursday Club will have many more years of enjoyment and success.